I've been reading a book on and off for a little bit called The Art of Neil Gaiman. I love Neil Gaiman. Feel like he's one of the few things that I can currently clearly say in my mind I'm drawn to from my heart and not from my mind, which is a bit of a loop because of how I phrased that. My heart loves Neil Gaiman, not just my mind, is what I'm trying to get at. The book has been amazing. There have been so many little things I just stumble across in it. One of the things I just stumbled across recently, earlier today actually, was the idea that you can't transliterate things. You have to translate them. He brought up the example of somebody who'd taken his graphic novel, Violent Cases, and in an effort to be truly faithful to it, had done a very precise transliteration, taking the graphic novel and just made it a play without adapting it. And how a lot of the things that were really subtle and nice in the graphic novel seemed way too big in the play, and a lot of the things that were really subtle in the play were big things in the graphic novel that weren't coming through. I thought that was a really cool idea, just as a fundamental of a thing that I already kind of had an intuition about, which is that adapting when you take from one medium to another is really good. I've always been a person who gets angry at people who want a movie to be faithful to a book, because I think it's a whole new process when you restart it, and there's so much good that can come out of that translation process. Aronofsky brought up this idea during a talk. I forget exactly in what context. He plays with the idea of balancing a shift between objectivity and subjectivity a lot in his films, which I can definitely see. And he actually pointed out that in all of his films except Noah, this is a thing, because Noah's a lot more of a straightforward, old classical kind of tale. One of the ways he talked about doing this shift from objectivity to subjectivity in Requiem for a Dream, for example, shooting really wide in terms of shot structure, not just focal length, and then moving closer and closer as he gets closer to the end of the film, by which point you're shooting mostly in close-ups. So objectivity to subjectivity. That's something that I'd love to really own in on and do more, is when I write something, not just going and directing it based off what I've written. I'm gonna try and do good storytelling visually. I'm gonna do all of the things I need to get the performance I want, but I think there still could be a different level to it with the kind of process that Aronofsky was talking about, of deciding things like switching from objectivity to subjectivity. Not that specifically, but that as an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. Perhaps there could be something to be said for having a split, or rather an additional layer when coming at it as a director. Instead of just taking the what's it about, which is fundamental and ties the whole film together from a story and writing perspective, and making all of my decisions based off of that, maybe I can do that while layering on a secondary layer that I'm trying to explore as a director in addition to the film's what's it about. The objectivity to subjectivity thing in this example probably does tie to what Requiem for a Dream is about as a film overall, but it isn't the what's it about in and of itself. It's an additional layer that feeds into that. So all of this is a rambling way of me saying that something I think would be really valuable to focus on as somebody who's trying to be a writer-director, or at least trying to write films and also direct them, is to translate my screenplay into a film more consciously. Like I said, I've already been doing that in terms of being mindful of trying to storytell visually and in terms of how I direct, but perhaps this translation process would help with giving me another level of why that could give me more information to work from and a core to bounce back off of when making decisions in terms of shot structure, shot length, coverage, choices to put forward to actors as options. Anyway, just some thoughts on translating from different mediums and on this idea of not transliterating, but translating instead.